Tragedy strikes. Calder house owners found dead in their home. It's a pretty catching title, really, when you think about it. Hopefully it was catching and daunting enough that it made you actually click on this video to for you to investigate further, and I do appreciate you doing that. Well, this story involves Grant and I's life experience, so what better way to tell a story than one that belongs to yourself? So I'm going to take you back several weeks ago, and yeah, before we go there to the story, I actually wanted to say something about the title. It's a very, very strong title, and you know, you make the assumption that we were the ones that were found dead, and I just want to say that certainly that could have been us. Our story could have had a very different ending, like the ending of the title that you just read. So without being totally dramatic, yeah, it was actually something that could have easily have been the headlines from the experience that we just recently had. So let me bring you to the story. Several weeks ago, as the furnace was running in the house, I had noticed on the second floor near the bathroom that Grant and I use a smell of gas. Now, as you know, natural gas doesn't actually have a smell. They do add something to it in order to give it a bit of a sulfuric smell. And I'm well aware what that smell actually smells like. And every once in a while when I would go by the bathroom, I would get this little whiff of smell that smelled like gas. And you know, our minds are really funny. We always try to rationalize everything that is coming through our sensory input. And my first thought was, I must have imagined that. And when I smelt it again, my second thought was, oh, must be something going on with my nose because I was fighting a tooth infection. And you know, it's all related to all the sinuses and everything, and I figured, hey, it's got to do with my tooth infection. I don't need to worry about this. And then a week, 2 weeks have gone by, and I still would get the occasional whiff, and then my rational mind would say, well, how come I'm smelling it here on the second floor and I'm not smelling it on the first floor? Not thinking why that would be the case, but as you know, at the Calder house, we have 3 lovely cats, and they're constantly going in and out of the house, so if there was any kind of smell on the first floor, we really wouldn't get much of it because, you know, there's a lot of fresh air coming in and out of the house. Sometimes we're the butler for those cats, and we're opening those doors probably like 20 or 30 times a day. And so that would give the house some really good, beautiful flow of fresh air without us knowing that there was anything lingering behind. And after a couple of weeks, I thought, you know when you have that intuition that's just niggling at you and I think I need to check the furnace. So I went downstairs into the crawl space and I noticed there was a whole bunch of water on the floor. Now, we do have a high efficiency furnace and it does have condensation, but the condensation then, I had discovered a lot of water in the basement, and I thought to myself, okay, this is kind of unusual. I should really call a plumber and heating guy and have it checked over. And so before I called though, I took the panel off of the furnace and I got a whiff of the gas. And I thought, okay, is that normal? Probably not. I shouldn't be smelling any gas. And I thought for sure we'd maybe had a leak somewhere around the furnace. So I came upstairs and I called a plumbing and heating guy to come and have a look, and he was able to pop in within a few hours. And his first priority was to look to see if we had a gas leak into the furnace itself. So he was checking all of the joints and there was no gas leak. And then he then focused on concerning himself with the water, and there was obviously, it was being blocked, the water wasn't coming out properly from the condensation from the furnace. And so he had cleaned that all up and thought we got that going, and then he checked every joint in the house where the gas was coming in to see if there was any leakage going on. He checked behind the stove, he checked at the hot water tank, and he even went outside and checked the joints outside, and there was no gas leak whatsoever. So I thought, okay, great, this is good. We don't need to worry about this, and all is good. So then, I don't know, I'm really kind of fuzzy on the time, probably 3 or 4 or 5 days later, the furnace is blowing and it's doing its thing, and I smelt the smell again in the bathroom. And I thought, and I kept asking Grant if he could smell it, because, you know, we question ourselves, and we think that we're imagining things, and I have a very acute sense of smell, and it's kind of hard to fool me on smells at all, and I'm just like, I'm smelling this gas. So again, you know, we're not paying too much seriousness to it, and then I was in our TV room, and I was standing over the heat register as the furnace was blowing, and I smelt that smell there. And I thought, oh my God. So then I started to walk around in every room on the second floor, and I was standing on top of the heat registers, and I was smelling the gas. And at that point, then alarm bells and whistles and everything were going off in my head and my heart, and I was like, you need to shut the furnace down. So I said to Grant, I think we need to shut the furnace down, but I think we need to shut the gas off to the house. So then I'm busy Googling to see how I do that, and not thinking at all that I could call Manitoba Hydro for any of those things. Like, you're not thinking straight. So then I went outside to see if I could shut the gas off to the house, and I couldn't move the lever that shuts it off. But while I was out there, the furnace was working, and out of the exhaust that was coming out of the house, the smell was so strong and so potent, and I knew that wasn't normal, because I know what it normally smells like when the exhaust is coming out when the furnace is running. So I went and grabbed Grant, and I said, okay, come and smell this. Can you tell me if you smell this? And he's like, yes, I can smell that. I said, that's not normal. And I could see this liquid coming out of the exhaust, and I was just thinking it was this condensation again, not thinking that it could actually be the gas. Anyways, so I come into the house that night. I can't shut the gas off to the house, and when the plumber and heater guy was here, he said to me, you know, Carol, if you smell it again, call Manitoba Hydro. They will come out, they have a sophisticated piece of equipment, and they'll be able to do the readings to make sure that you don't have any gas leaks in the house. I thought, okay, I'll do that. But now it's Sunday night, it's about 11 o'clock at night, and my mind is thinking, well, I can't call Manitoba Hydro now. Like, they're not going to come at this time. I'm going to have to call them first thing in the morning. So I thought, oh, okay, so what do? I can't shut the gas off to the house because I can't move the thing. So I shut the furnace off, and then I opened every window on the second floor about an inch or so to allow some cold air movement. And then we threw on like 4 blankets on top of us as we went to bed. And we went to bed. And as I'm laying in bed thinking that it's very possible that none of us wake up in the morning, that we could actually die tonight in our sleep. And interestingly enough, as those weird thoughts are going through my mind, I was like, well, I've lived a good life. I'm not afraid of death. It would be okay if I didn't wake up. But then my mind started to roll, and I started to think about, well, who would find us? How long would it be before somebody realized that we were dead? It's funny how these weird irrational thoughts go through your mind. And then in the morning, at about 6 o'clock in the morning, I woke up. My eyes popped open and I thought, okay, God's not finished with me yet. I'm still here and I'm still breathing. And I'm not done yet. And then I phoned Manitoba Hydro. They came within a couple of hours. They were awesome. They went through the whole house and did some readings, and there were no readings of any gas at all. But we had not turned on the furnace yet. And then, as he's downstairs checking the equipment and everything, he says, okay, we're going to turn the furnace on now and see what happens. So we turned it on, and within 5, 10, 15 minutes, we started to get readings through the house. Not very strong readings, but readings nevertheless. And then our hydro gentleman went outside to check the exhaust, and the readings were off the chart. He said, I'm shutting you down right now. He said, you have liquid gas coming out of your exhaust. He said, one light and this whole place would blow. It took a few minutes for that to sort of sink in. Not just the fact the house could have blown, but that we actually could have not woken up. And pretty scary stuff. So the day of that diagnosis, I myself felt very frenzied with the what ifs and the what ifs and the what ifs and the what ifs, and what were the signs, and how come I didn't react sooner, and why wasn't I thinking, and you know, and we berate ourselves and on and so forth. And you have to realize that when you're being poisoned with natural gas, carbon monoxide, it starts to take oxygen away from your blood cells. It starts to kill the brain very slowly, and different things start to happen. And although we were feeling all of those symptoms ever so slowly, but it wasn't like it came on gradually, so that for us it was like a malaise that just wouldn't go away, but without us really understanding what it was about. And some of the symptoms were so similar to other things that were going on in our lives with our health that we really didn't give it too much of a second thought. So yeah. 2 people found dead at the Calder house certainly could have been our story. And I'm sharing this with you today because I want you, we wish you to start the year on the right foot, doing the right things for you and your family, so that this doesn't become another headline of some tragedy of a family being found dead with their pets. You know, we can prevent this. And Grant and I could have prevented this to a point where if we had done due diligence. And there are a lot of things that you can do. Lots of things I've learned through this process. The first thing I learned is that when you have a gas furnace, it is crucially important for you to have it checked before you start it up every winter. Hire somebody, get them to come in, get them to check everything, and make sure that everything is operating at its highest efficiency. The second thing I've learned is I've always been an intuitive person. I make a living with my intuition, my spiritual guidance, and it was yelling at me. My intuition was telling me, and I kept doubting it. I kept rationalizing it, and it wasn't a time to be doing that. We know. We innately know when things are not right, and we need to trust that. And I think the most important thing I learned in that was that it doesn't need to be In order to trust it, it doesn't need to be supported by someone else. I kept seeking support from Grant to acknowledge that, yes, my intuition was correct, that something was wrong, but I wasn't getting that from him. He wasn't able to give that to me. He had been, like me, he was being poisoned by the gas. So you need to trust, and you need not to seek outside support to say yay or nay on that intuition. You need to just follow it. That's probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned. Apart from getting your furnace serviced every year, one of the things that is crucial for you to do as well is to check your, if you don't already have one, a carbon monoxide detector. We actually had one. The problem is they have an expiry date. They don't last more than 6 years. And we didn't know that. We probably knew it at the time that we purchased it because we would have read the directions and would have installed it. But 6 years goes by and you don't really remember that stuff. And we were told that the little vents in the carbon monoxide detector needs to be vacuumed weekly when you vacuum, and that you need to test it at least once a month to make sure that it's actually working. And so we did have one, but it was probably around 10 years old, maybe even older. Therefore, it had long expired and it did not detect anything. I've also learned that the Western world of dealing with issues like poisoning and disease are very different from an Eastern philosophy. And when we understand what happens when you get carbon monoxide poisoning is that it is heavier than oxygen and it attaches itself to your blood cells. There are only room for, I believe it's 4 oxygen atoms to a blood cell. And what they do is they kick off the oxygen and take over the space where the oxygen is. So literally, you're starving your body of oxygen. From the Western perspective, we did bring ourselves into emergency at some point afterwards, and we were told that our vital signs were really good and that there was nothing that we could do, that we had to just go through the process. It would take maybe 2 weeks before we would start feeling better. Well, the truth of the matter is it has been, it's been a month, and I think that we're only now starting to feel a little bit better. But when I consulted my guides and my teachers, there are things that you can do from an Eastern perspective. You need to bring oxygen into the body, and there are a couple of different ways we can do that. We can do it through breath. There are very specific breathing techniques like the Bhastrika breath that were taught in Ayurveda and in yoga that helps to pump in the oxygen into the body. So you want to do that. The second thing I learned is that chlorophyll helps to also oxygenate the blood. So you want to eat a lot of greens. Maybe you want to supplement with greens. I've been supplementing with a moringa tea, which is high in chlorophyll, and that has made a difference. The other thing that I was guided to do was to do some very specific moves in yoga to help move the gas out of the body. And it works because there are smells coming out of my body that are not natural. Maybe they're natural gas, but they're not natural as to what you digest. It just didn't, yeah, anyways, I don't need to go into details around that. But yeah, so there are definitely things that we can do from a Eastern health perspective in order to help the body get rid of the residue. The other thing is, as you all know, I work in energy, is that gas is in your aura field, and it hovers and it's heavy. We don't see it, we don't smell it at this point, but it's there on an energetic level. And so I did some treatments around removing that from the aura field. So it's been over 4 weeks. I'm starting to feel good. I know Grant is starting to slowly feel well also. And I would imagine it's going to be a long journey to where we are back to where we were. The number one thing that I've felt the difference is that the synapses, the brain, I feel like I've had some sort of a brain injury, like it's just not resonating, it's not thinking, it's not intellectualizing, it's just it's happening in a very, very slow motion. At the end of the day, you're probably wondering, so what was wrong? If the joints were all checked for leakage and there was no leakage, how is it that we were getting this gas in the house? And something that apparently commonly happens with gas furnaces is that the exchange block gets a crack in it. And once it has a crack, then it will release the gas through that crack. I don't begin to understand the ins and outs of furnaces and how they're made. But what I do know is that when there's a crack in the exchange, the gas leak happens through the heat vents. That's where you're going to notice it. And that was definitely the case for us. Our furnace is 17 years old and it's time for a new one. We won't be using the old one. And so I leave you with this video with a New Year's wish. As we embark in the 2018 year, my wish, as it is Grant's wish, is that you be healthy, that you be well. And there are things that, if you're a homeowner, that you need to do due diligence in making sure that your family is safe and well and healthy. And it's a small drop in the bucket to spend a couple of $100s to come and get your furnace checked out, but well worth it, because it could mean your life and the ones of your loved ones. So from the bottom of my heart, I hope you take this story to heart, and that if you haven't done your due diligence, then give the biggest gift you can to your loved ones by taking action and responsibility in making sure that your furnace is working properly and that there are no risks of having any kind of gas leak, the silent killer, in your home. Namaste.